Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob, and this is your weekly roundup of the Rangers news here at the Rangers Journal. Today, with me, I have Billy. Thanks very much for joining us, Billy. How are you today?
Good. Thanks, Bob. And the Rangers board might not bow to fan pressure and listen to public opinion, but after getting it so tight about my shirt last night on the pod, I have bowed to public pressure, and I'm wearing a very, very safe Davy Cooper Football Genius t-shirt. So, so the 49ers might not be subject to the whims of change, but I definitely am.
Yeah. I mean, and if you've not caught that, folks, please go ahead and look back at the pod from last night, the Q&A. So if you know, you know. But yeah, today's news, again, just probably looking back at the last week in the world of Rangers. Obviously, we're a week on from the announcement from the takeover, which we all thoroughly enjoyed last Friday for many hours, both for myself and yourself, Billy. Obviously, over the weekend, there was speculation rife about the incoming new manager or head coach. We finally did get that announcement yesterday, with Russell Martin being announced as the new head coach of the club, bringing in Matt Gills, not Jilks, as some people might have seen on social media, Matt Gills as his assistant. And also, I think there's a physio and a sports scientist coming in as part of that team. So just with that being said, Billy, maybe just your thoughts over the last week, and obviously the announcement yesterday of Russell Martin as the new head coach.
Oh, I mean, it's been interesting because I think Russell Martin in horse racing terms would be like the one that sort of just slowly creeps up the sort of on the inside while everyone's watching the front three, and eventually came through, and he's the Rangers manager. So I think he's probably the one that when people were getting polarised and getting excited about the options, he's actually the one that wasn't getting discussed that much. You know, you had the Ancelotti like camp who were quite keen on this sort of the sexy name and a kind of modern coach. You had people like myself actually who ultimately thought like Gerrard was probably the best candidate. As much as Gerrard had a lot still now to prove with his recent record, I think Gerrard would have been the least risky appointment. So people, it's almost like really until he came through at the last minute, like Russell Martin wasn't getting talked about as the candidate. And I think all of us, like Scotty and Dino nailed it in the reaction pod. It was, it's kind of, okay, it's Russell Martin then. And it's funny because in some ways that's maybe not a bad thing. I think we need to actually, I think, be quite grown up about this. We've decided we want new owners. We want new owners who are going to run the club the modern way. So not be kind of, running about trying to second guess the fans, and actually look at a long-term plan and look at who they think is going to bring us success. Now, whether that's Russell Martin or not, time will tell, and we will all back him because it's what we do as Rangers fans. But I found, from going from a position of being initially not very excited, having heard them talk, I'm a wee bit more on board with what his credentials are, and I definitely, if we said this before, Ancelotti may be the next big thing, but Russell Martin's got 5 or 6 years of making mistakes, making the right decision, making the wrong decision, learning from it, and sort of doing it under pressure, which we just don't know if Ancelotti can do. One thing that does that just keeps coming up, and in terms of a risk makes me a wee bit wary, is just we don't know how he's going to play in Europe. We don't know how good he's going to be in Europe. And the reason I bring that up is obviously we want to win the league. That's the thing that we're all craving after recent years. But like it or not, the revenue stream from Europe is one of the 2 big revenue streams we have. And we've kind of got a wee bit used to the kind of European standard and the relative success that we've had since Gerrard came in, which hopefully continues under Martin, but that was not the norm previously. So the money that comes in from Europe, clearly the 49ers think Russell Martin's going to deliver that, but he's unproven in that arena. So that does make me a wee bit a wee bit sort of apprehensive going into, for example, Champions League qualifiers, where okay, he's done all right things in knockout competition before getting Southampton up, but this is not the same. This is not the same format. It's not the same opposition. So I'm a lot more on board the Russell Martin train than I was before it was announced, but with reservations. And the only other thing I'd say is whoever we appointed, I was going to have reservations because Ancelotti's untested as a manager. Gerrard with a slightly tarnished brand, and had he lost the hunger, would he be the same with the different backroom staff? So, yeah, I'm on board, but with reservations. If that, I could have said that in 10 seconds and saved us a lot of
Yeah, no, I get that, Billy. I think for myself, I think, as seems to be the majority, or was the majority, as it was announced yesterday, or as it came out kind of late Wednesday night, it certainly wasn't, I think, who the majority of 95, 99% of the fans had as their first choice. And then, just as you touched on, I think that's maybe something that we need to take into consideration, that every time the club have went for the fans' choice or the fans' vote, whether that be Gio or Clement or Beale, it's obviously not been successful for us. And probably just what kind of what you touched on there, and I think what you touched on in last night's pod as well, is that this is a result of us having, and I think Ryan touched on it in another pod as well, having actual grown-ups who are not Rangers fans run the club as we want it to be run, as a business as well as a club. And I think they'll have seen this, and I'm sure I mentioned it in the chat as well. This guy, they've seen, Pragmarat has seen this guy up close with Leeds in the Championship, obviously 2 seasons ago, and also with Swansea prior to that, and seen how well his team plays, how he's set up, how difficult they are potentially to break down and win against. So that's obviously played a part in the discussions. And to me, I'm the same as you. I'm more on board with Russell Martin after listening to his press conference yesterday and the very short interview that was released last night on RTV. I know you mentioned I think there's a second part to that came out this morning, which I've not seen just yet. But again, I would share your concerns, maybe the reservations, in that European-wise, he's never dealt with European games. Yes, he said in his interview that the high pressure games, the high stake games are something that he gets himself up for, and he seems to come alive more. And I know you mentioned that in the interview last night regarding the playoff final from last year with Southampton, that those types of games are the ones that you get the buzz out of, and maybe that's hopefully going to be the case for the European qualifiers coming up, that if we back him both on and off the park, he gets the players in that he needs to play the style he wants to play, that we should hopefully see some success, short term at least. But yeah, still have those kind of niggles in the back of my mind. What are the board looking at? As a domestic success first and foremost, and then whatever we do in Europe's a bonus. Again, just as you touched on, the financial stream coming in from Europe and European football, most obviously, more obviously the Champions League, will help his cause, both in recruitment and he's standing with the fans if we can get back into the Champions League, which again is no easy feat. We've seen it over the last couple of years, but certainly, probably just as you touched on, let's give him the opportunity. Let's we know that where we are in terms of playing squad. We've all discussed it towards the end of the last season, and obviously the pods leading up to the announcement and the appointment of the manager, that it was really seen in stark contrast that the manager is not the problem here. It's the group of players that we have, and we need to start getting more out of the players that we have, and also trying to bring in better quality to supplement those quality players that we have in the squad already. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one. So yeah, go ahead, Billy.
No, I was just going to say some interesting points coming in the chat there. I think I think like John Adams was saying there that like he's not bothered about Europe and the focus is the league, and I think actually we all agree with that. We what's going to make us happy next season is winning the league, and actually for a couple of seasons, my point, John, was we can't afford to take our eye off of Europe entirely. I think most of us would accept, like one of the other points coming in there, that getting into Europa League would get enough money for us to be ticking over. And if we won the league, we'd be happy with that. But the reality is, in the Europa League last season, we got like 28 million euros, which is about 10 times what you get for winning the SPL. So we can't ignore Europe, because if we want to be successful going forward, we need that chunk of money year after year after year to build the squad that's going to win us the league. So I think it is a balancing act, and I'm kind of on board with what a lot of people are saying, is maybe we might not expect to get into the Champions League. And to be honest, it may not be a bad thing in Russell Martin's first season, because we saw what happened when we get into the Champions League before. We were undercooked. We get an injury to Connor Golson, and the next thing, we're getting absolute shellackings. So, we'd all love to be in the Champions League, but if I was saying what I think gives us the best chance of building to the league, I would have said Europa League and the money from that. One of the things that you actually said, Bob, that Paul McCorrickle was saying there, I think is absolutely key. It's how they back him with players. Russell Martin is going to be the driver of a car, and it's going to be what they put under the hood for him. So I think that is going to be the defining factor. In if he's good enough, great. I will die on the hill that Phil Clement could have won us the league if he'd been backed, and I don't think, because Philip Clement came in to a team that was bad enough to get the previous manager sacked, that was effectively out of the title race, and Clement got us back into the title race, so we were all dreaming again, which we kind of was a double-edged sword, because we held it against them the next season. Unfortunately, the next season we downgraded. So what we expected was a manager who came into a team that was good enough to get the previous manager sacked and not good enough to challenge. We downgraded in that, and then we were surprised that Clement wasn't challenging for the league, because John Lundstrom, with the best will in the world, is what he is. Solid player, can dictate a game, has the turning arc of like a small super tanker. But you can't say Connor Barron was an upgrade, for example. So I don't want to see happen to Russell Martin what happened to Philip Clement, and I'm hopeful that with the 49ers there is much less chance of that being the case.
Yeah, no, exactly, Billy. I think for me, I'm the same. I think, I know there was a clip of our previous manager out yesterday on BBC, and that his point of view on the new manager announcement in the backing of the club as well. So I totally agree. I think, with new owners in place, with the proposed investment, I know that it may not all go into the playing side of the squad, but I'm sure they'll certainly place a priority, as Patrick Stewart said yesterday in the press conference. That there have been discussions on what's required, how much money is required, how much money will be segmented to the playing operations of the team. But it's also trying to get a tune out of some of the players that we've just not seen a tune out of. I know that, again, emphasis on youth players, academy players, are kind of what we touched on in the chat, and I know that was touched on yesterday in a couple of the pods as well, that he seems to do, he seems to have an emphasis on at least bringing some of the youth players through, or academy players through, which is again hopeful to hear. The likes of Bailey Rice, Robbie Fraser coming back from his loan, players of that ilk. Now, I know in tandem to that, or in parallel to that, we've let over a dozen youth players go over the last week or so as well, which again's not great to see. But I'm hopeful that with the management team in place and the board backing them, we will hopefully get to a point where we can mix both the quality of a youth academy player and also bringing players in from both home and abroad. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. I guess at this moment in time, we're obviously now just eager to see, having kind of settled the manager debate, who from a recruitment point of view comes in, and who from a who goes out to kind of supplement any additional funds for the manager. And just on that, I think it's certainly been circulated on social media over the last kind of 12 to 18 hours. I think there is I say a strong rumour that Robin Proper has reached an agreement to go back to 20 after only a year at the club. So maybe just get your thoughts on that, Billy, if that comes to pass. I know there's been nothing official from the club as yet, but that seems to be something that seems to be getting worked on at the moment.
I mean, I think it says a lot about recent recruitment and Robin Proper in particular, that you kind of hear that and you go, fair enough. There's no real up or down about it. And I don't think Robin Proper was a terrible player. I think he was in the wrong movie, and I think he was maybe an indicator of how much we were scrabbling about towards the end of the transfer window last season, because he looks like a decent defender in a technical league. He played in Holland, and a lot of his better games were in Europe. Where actually, you're playing at a higher level, and yet he wasn't having the issues he was having in Scotland. But the reality is, he was getting ragdolled fairly regularly in Scotland, and you could see him. And it's not great. We like Rangers centre backs to be, in the sort of Terry Butcher, like human wall sort of form. And it wasn't great to see him sort of. You could actually see him in moments looking around, going, what the, and looking at the referee for protection, and the referee's not interested. So I don't think he was. I don't think he's disgraced himself. I don't think he showed up badly. I think his game just wasn't suited to the Scottish game, and to be honest, it's one of those situations I would pin more on the recruitment and maybe the kind of desperation that was shown at the end of the transfer window than Robin Proper. He played the kind of game he played in Holland. He played as the kind of player he is, and it just didn't suit the Scottish Football League game. And that it really is going to be interesting, because that is the challenge. We've done. Arguably, Europe has been like the kind of the beacon of hope in the last few years when the league hasn't been that great. And somehow Russell Martin, who hasn't managed in Europe, is going to have to find a way to do what Celtic managed to, because they've got more money and can have a slightly deeper squad. I say slightly because I don't think they're as far ahead as everyone thinks, but having a team that can win in this odd little sort of league that Scotland is, the sort of time warp in many ways that Scotland is, although that might change next season with some of the new management and ownership coming in, and then somehow be decent in Europe. And I saw we had a post up saying that we can't afford to dismiss the Champions League qualifiers or get into the Champions League, and I'm not dismissing them. We'll all be rooting for Rangers to get into the group stages of the Champions League. So when we're watching the games, that's what we'll want. When you step back and do the reality check, it may be that in the long term, for one season, the Europa League allows us to have a decent European run, and also be competing for the league. I think it's possible. I'm not saying it's likely, but I think it is possible to win the league in Russell Martin's first season with the right backing, with a couple of breaks going away, because Scottish football, a lot of the time, it's about momentum and pressure. And if the momentum is with one side and the pressure goes in the other, we saw what happened to Celtic during the 55 season. So I think we can do that. But the Champions League for me gives me the fear, because we're rebuilding a squad, and it's going to be young players, and they're going to be knitting together, and you can get some very demoralising results in that Champions League format. So I'm not saying I don't want us in the Champions League, but I'm quite split on what I think the best thing going forward would be. But Robin Proper, he came, he saw it, he looked around, he got kicked a bit, he played a couple of decent European games, and if he goes back to Holland, I don't think he'll go with any ill will.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I think it's just, again, trying to fit square pegs in round holes, Billy. I think we've just been, recruitment-wise, just so unlucky or unfortunate over the last year or two with who we've brought in. I think, as you say, losing Goldson selling Goldson and bringing in Robin Proper, having never played out with Holland before, it's certainly a shock to the system. And again, if it is true that that he's agreed, or there has been an agreement made for him to go back to 20, then again, I wish him all the best. But he certainly he showed up relatively well in European games. Just domestically, we just don't. It takes a certain type of player to play domestically in Scotland. I just see Paul's comment as well about wants to, if Martin wants to keep Davis and Dill. Well, I know that they've obviously both had a good season with on loan at Birmingham, who've just come up to the Championship. My thoughts are that I would hope that they don't get kept. I think their agents should be made aware that they should be getting moved on. Despite having a good season again, just like said, Ben Davis and both Kieran Dill have shown in spells that they are good players, but I just don't think they have what it takes to be Rangers players. Quote unquote. They. Again, I was quite excited to see Dill come in when he first signed on a free. Despite the injury record, I thought, well, if we can get a tune out of him, then he can be certainly a good player and a good mix for Cantwell at the time. Obviously, that's not come to pass. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting one on who's going to go out the door, Billy. Do you think either Davis or Dill has a chance of keeping a spot in the squad under the new management team?
I mean, me personally, I think would be mad if we can get money for either of them just now. Take the money and run, because Dill came in and he actually, his first couple of games he scored that absolute howitzer into the top corner in one game, and you thought, all right, there's something there, but if they couldn't make it in a team, all right, the team's struggling, but there's two ways of looking at that. That you're coming into a team that's in it's toiling a bit, but equally, is there a better time as a good player to come in and state your claim? It's much more difficult to get into like a title winning side where things are running smoothly and everyone's playing at peak performance. I think given where we were with Dowell and Davis at the start of the season, if Birmingham are in a position where they want to take them on for money, or given how well they've actually performed, and someone else wants to make us an offer, I would take the money and put it towards buying someone that Russell Martin specifically wants, because like Dowell, I can actually think of the two bits of skill Dill has shown in the whole time in his Rangers career. One is that goal, and another was in a game that was he'd come on as a sub. I can't even remember the game, but he did he spun over the top of the ball, turned around and just arced this beautiful pass, and it's like, whoa, where'd that come from? And that sadly is the problem. I don't know if he does that in training, but I saw two bits of football from Kieran Dill. He runs about. I'm sure I'm sure a lot of it is like levels, and that he's now at a level where he can show a bit more. But I would take the money. And Davis, to me, no harm to the guy, but he's just there. It's like, you want your centre halves to be, have personality, whether you're, the sort of the kind of all out attack centre half, or whether you're one that's sitting back and covering. You want to know who they are. You want to feel like John Souttar's got his flaws and he gets caught under the ball and he's better as a siege defender. But I feel like we know who John Souttar is, and I feel like John Souttar gives you a lot of personality and he puts himself into it. Ben Davis, to me, and this might be wrong, but he feels like a modern pro who wants to come in, play some games, make his money, retire, and probably have another career. I just, they had their chances at Rangers, and if we bring them back and they play the way they played before, no one's given us money. If they've currently, on the basis that last season, got a market value where we can cash in, take the money, that's what I would do.
Yeah, I agree, Billy. I think for both, that they've both had spells in the team where they've been okay. Again, same with Proper, that they've showed up well in some games, but just no consistency. And again, that's just a fault that we've had with our signings over the last 2, 3, 4 years. Could hark back to after Gerrard left. But yeah, I think I see the comment about the potential combination bid of £3.5 million for both of them from Birmingham once the takeover was announced and the manager was in place. So really wait and see if that comes to pass over the next week or two. I know I've been having a couple of comments in the group chat about the transfer windows, and I think that this new or this specific transfer window is open till the 10th of June, and then it reopens on the 16th. So I know, I think there are deals getting done in that time period, but again, I'd like to think we'll get to see some more new signings coming in probably from the 16th of June onwards. But yeah, same as you for Davis and Dowell. I think it's better just to get out the door. Again, fresh management, fresh ownership. We need freshness in the playing team.
It's also sorry. No, I was just going to say, it's how the loan system works. You take players who have got no value that you literally have to give away to get them out the door. And then if it works after a season, people go, actually, they've done all right. We'll give you some money for them. It's like, do it. That's how it's supposed to work. It's worked. Take the money and run.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the same. Same could be said for Matondo. Obviously, Matondo's loan spell hasn't went well because again he was injured. So and I think the less said on that, the better. But it's the likes of those guys that we're paying a lot of money for in terms of weekly wage that we need to start. Again, as we touched on at the start of the pod, we've got actual grown-ups running this club now as a business, and they're going to know what's financially beneficial for the club is to get these high earners out and start to try and bring in quality players on lesser money, and whether that be coming from the SPFL or down south or abroad, unearth a couple of gems. That would be great. But certainly for the current playing squad, there's certainly a number of people or number of players that we could see head out the door over the summer if a decent bid comes in. I know that Ryan of our parish is one for seeing Raskin going out. I think you're in the same boat as that. If in terms of if a decent bid comes in for Raskin, that getting this player trading model off the ground properly, sentiment can't play a part in seeing these players go out the door. So, again, just moving on to just as we said there about Raskin, for me, if we were to get a bid in, 15-20 million, that then helps Russell Martin bring in more players that he needs for his team, and you've just got to take that sacrifice. What's your thoughts?
Raskin's a no-brainer for me. Just to be clear, I love how he's developed this season. I love seeing him become the player that we thought he was going to turn into when he came to us. But if you're putting your 49ers cap on, which a lot of us seem to be doing these days, he is a player who's been here, 2.5 years, and he has had a period in the last 8-9 months where he has. You can look at it one of two ways. He's either made a developmental leap and he's starting to become the player that we want him to be and he wants to be, or he's had a purple patch. Either way, he's 2 years from the end of his deal. After this summer, the power starts to sluice towards Mikola Raskin, and we have to. If he won't extend the deal, we have to sell. And to be honest, I would sell anyway because he is the epitome of cashing out. He's at peak. I would say peak value. But someone wants to spend the guts of 20 million on him, and that 20 million can go a long way in the rebuild. And at the end of the day, if we start next season and he goes back a wee bit, his value goes down. I don't know how much more valuable he can become in Scottish football. It's possible if he plays in a title-winning side and he plays out of his skin next season, you get another 5 or 10 million, or not. If someone wants to pay 20 million for him now, we just have to take it because we can't make the mistakes we made with the likes of Morelos and Kent. This is where the 49ers are going to be, I think, are going to be cold-blooded. They made their money, made 100 million at Leeds doing that. And I think Raskin to me seems like a no-brainer. He's at the age, he's in peak form, he's saleable, he's apparently been talked about and getting sort of decent money in. So I've made my peace with, like, if we can get money, he's off. What will be interesting in terms of the 49ers and how cold-blooded they are is what happens if we get a tempting offer for Igaman, because Igaman is, to me, a player who's got more development that he could do here. And we can get, in terms of playing, I think he could be, if he continues to develop next season, he could be vital to the team, and he could get better, and he could win us things. So what do the 49ers do if they get, like, I don't know, say a 20, 25 million bid? I'm not saying it will come in, but if they get a tempting bid, is it just they have a line and it's like 20 million and he's off? So Raskin, for me, just makes common sense. He goes, if he goes with good wishes. He came in, we signed him at, like, was $1.5 million or something. He's become the player we wanted. We didn't get enough of a benefit of it, but if we get a chunk of money back, then it's kind of worked. Igaman, to me, that would be tempting, because, like, he's almost like he's the one we're looking at next season and thinking, wow, look what that kid's done in just over half a season in a new continent. Never mind, like, a strange little league like Scotland. Look at some of the goals he scored. He gets people excited. So that'll be interesting, because the 49ers have got to balance making money and with actually keeping the fans hopeful and excited and giving us a reason to turn up and watch the team, even though season ticket uptake was 98-99% anyway. So Raskin, no-brainer for me. Igaman, I really hope he's here next season, but it'll be interesting to see what the reaction would be if we got a bid, how the 49ers would look at it.
Yeah, again, I think even just touching back on the press conference from yesterday and in the interview, it'll be interesting to see what Russell Martin makes of the squad when he gets a chance to get them on the training ground and actually assess every player properly. He did say that wherever he's went, there have been a few players that at least a couple of players that have surprised them, despite what what he's heard out with being at the club. So again, that'll be interesting to see if he somehow unearths a gem or two that we've not come across before, or gets more out of the players that are currently there. But before we move on, just to say for the 250 odd folk that are watching, we are sponsored by Off to the Match I Go. You can see the banner at the bottom of the screen. Please head over, as Billy's nicely promoting there. Please go to the website for official merch. And signed quality gifts from Off to the Match I Go. Please use Journal 10 to get 10% off anything on the website. Also, if you are watching us on Facebook or X, please head over to the YouTube page and give us a like and a subscribe. We certainly appreciate everybody that has done recently. I think we've still got the competition ongoing, Billy, for either the signed print of Collinstein and Willie Johnston, or the new home top. I don't know when Scotty's going to make that draw, but certainly get yourself into that draw by giving us a like and a subscribe on YouTube, and as well as all other social media channels. We're on everywhere, and please look out for the daily TikToks from the squad. There you go, just as Scotty mentioned that there. Well, yeah, any new subscribers, welcome. Thank you for joining the Journal team. We do like to keep our content daily, so please look out for videos on a daily basis, our daily shorts on YouTube and TikTok, and all our forms of social media. We are very grateful for you joining the team. Again, maybe just moving on, Billy, regards Thelwell obviously coming in at the start of the week officially, and then just touching on some of the comments from the press conference yesterday regarding recruitment, just segueing into that, he did say it would be a collaborative process. There have been discussions already on what they feel or they think is good for the club, but ultimately, Russell Martin will be the coach of the team, and he will have an input. But it certainly seems to be a joint decision between both Thelwell and Russell Martin. It won't just be Martin's decision. It won't just be Thelwell's decision. There'll obviously be some sort of collaboration between the two. Again, I know, as I said just before we come on air, that the pod last night did touch on a number of transfer targets that we could potentially see at Ibrox. Maybe just your thoughts on that, Billy, and maybe your thoughts on potential transfers that we could see incoming? Anyone that caught your eye from last night's pod?
Well, I mean, in terms of like the relationship between Russell Martin and Thelwell, I think I'm expecting that to work relatively smoothly, because that's the model that Russell Martin's worked under down south. And I found it kind of interesting when Russell Martin was getting interviewed, he used the term manager about himself. And I think language is always interesting, but I think we maybe, you look a bit younger than me, Bob, but like I think we grew up roughly in an era where the manager was the manager. He was the one who knew the names of the tea ladies and kind of like, and basically was the figurehead for the whole club. And I think that there's been a shift. I mean, we all know about the head coach model, but I think genuinely Russell Martin thinks of himself as the manager. He just thinks, like a modern coach, that the job of the manager is to manage the team, is to coach the team. So, and that makes a lot of sense, because I think in modern football world, with all the responsibilities and all the aspects and commercial aspects and media and all sorts, I think there are very few people like a Walter Smith that can do everything and make it look like not a problem. So I don't think Russell Martin's getting hung up on labels, but I think he probably sees himself as the manager. I'm sure sitting down with like a Thelwell type person in his previous roles and saying, well, we've got these 3 or 4 players. They've probably got like a dozen players at least, for every role on a spreadsheet. And sitting down, looking at your top 2 or 3, and then one of them's off to another club. So, right, like who's the next one? And sitting down and having those sorts of recruitment type conversations. So, I don't know. I thought Thelwell there was a thread in FF, and I'm not sure. I think the original poster was like probably regretting putting it up because he universally got roasted for it. But he was basically saying that Thelwell, like, he'd been underwhelming at the press conference, and people were going like, he's the sporting director at a press conference where the manager's getting launched, what you expected. And I thought someone on the thread actually nailed it quite well. They went, he sounded quite sporting directory to me. And I was like, yeah, that's it. He seemed like the guy you'd want sitting looking at spreadsheets, looking at players and talking to the manager. So I don't really, I think that's where you kind of start to get this low burn excitement about the future, because it does look like we've got serious players in. It looks like it's a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces actually should fit. Whether we've had all the caveats about whether Russell Martin will be a success and how he'll get on, but the relationship looks like it should work. They look like they both have a similar understanding. What the exact details are, at the end of the day, where is the truth in a situation where the 49ers will give you a budget and Thelwell will have to parse the budget and he and Russell Martin have to sit down? There may be situations where no one's getting exactly the player they want, but that's been the case throughout time. It's just smoke and mirrors when you sign someone, and sometimes it's the guy you were after all along, and sometimes it's your third choice and you act like it's the guy you were after all along. So I think that's where it's going to be interesting to see Russell Martin like come in and do what he does to add value, because that's I think something we haven't seen enough of at Rangers. But I do think back to the Gerrard era, and I remember thinking, I'm seeing players getting better, and it was almost like, oh, can this happen? We get players at Rangers and they come in and that's their level, or they come in and very often they get worse. But under Gerrard, you're going, oh, he's better than he was a couple of months ago. And I'd quite like that. I'd quite like to see Russell Martin seeing potential, agreeing players with Thelwell, and then bringing them in and watching them actually develop at Rangers. That would be quite a breath of fresh air, given some of what we've seen. In terms of the players we were looking at last night, I've got to be honest, like my knowledge of kind of Championship football in England is not the best. Some of the players we were looking at looked, for like left and right back positions, looked like the right sort of profile, 22, 23, the kind of player that you can bring in at maybe 3 or 4 million, you can develop them, and then you can punt them on in a couple of years for 10, 15 million. That's what you do. There was one guy, and we have to excuse me, like a winger his name escapes me now. I think he was playing in in Belgium, and his stats looked great. And Tam, who was on, like picked me up because like I'm not a stato, so I was going, well, maybe he can develop part of his game. You know, he's got like 27% successful cross, like ratio. And Tam was like, that's elite level. You know, like Tav does 28% and elite level's 25 to 35%. I'm going, that's me schooled. So, but when you think about it, yeah, that makes sense. But the guy's stats look great, but his market value is like €8.5 million. I'm not sure. I'd love to think there's some way of working FFP in the budget, and the 49ers are going to litter our team with players who are going to be that sort of value. But I'm sure like that would be coming up in our second highest. Flo's still the highest, and I think Ryan Kent the second highest, something like that. So so I was just going to say, I mean, you maybe have some names in mind, Bob, but I'm thinking like that will be interesting. I think a couple of experienced players maybe where we're not going to make money back, but I'm expecting to see a team with a lot of players in the 20 to 24 mold who have got good experience, have shown that they can play in a first team, but actually we can then polish up and sell on. So like, that's what I would expect. And if you've got some names to throw at the mix, feel free.
Yeah, it's just to touch on who you are speaking about. I think the guy he's a Dozy.
Yes, yeah,
the winger. So because I think again, a player I think we were linked with last year, winger, obviously didn't make it on. I think it was probably the last day or second. I think it was the last day or two that the transfer window obviously never went through. It went to Belgium on loan. So again, he is probably the type of player the club has been looking at in the past. Billy. Same, obviously, Kyle Walker-Peters, again, ex-Southampton. I think he's coming up to the end of his contract as right back. Another athletic player who was, I think, previously at Spurs, I think he was, before he went to Southampton.
And Britton was the other one, wasn't it? He's a wee bit younger. We were looking at him. I thought he looked better value and maybe a wee bit better age profile. So, potentially those two look better. And again, with the Dozy, if we could, the market value on that assessment is $8.5 million. If we could get him for half that, yep. So just because that's what they're saying, that you always start high and maybe try and work it down. If we could get some sort of deal, the right type of deal, as we've seen with Oscar Cortez, you have to be careful. But yeah, if we could bring the price down, yes. Otherwise, I just don't see us spending that sort of money on a single player, to be honest.
Yeah, I think they'll, again, can only speculate, Billy. I think that the new owners will be probably frugal in certain approaches to finance. They'll not just want to blow a whole lot of money on the squad, within the first window. They'll obviously know that it is a rebuild, it is a building process, and maybe just kind of drop pick a couple here and there for quality. Again, even names closer to home. I know that there's been rumours around Josh Mulligan from Dundee. Obviously, we're bringing in Leo Cameron from Dundee. That was obviously done under the previous regime when they was copying his recruitment. So again, it'll be interesting to see if Leo Cameron's the type of player that fits into Russell Martin's style of play. I think even catching yesterday on at least one of the social media channels, the masterclass that Russell Martin's done, which I think's up on YouTube. So if anyone hasn't watched it, please go ahead and do that. It's quite insightful into one of the specific games he had when he was at Swansea, and he certainly likes an athletic midfielder, Billy. From what I've taken from that, he likes the high presses. I know he mentioned it yesterday in the press conference, and obviously over the last year or so in various interviews. But I think the likes of Leo Cameron, who has obviously looked impressive at Dundee, especially in the latter half of the season. Again, hopefully similar to likes of Bailey Rice, Robbie Fraser, Finlay Cutlass. Those types of younger players will hopefully get the opportunity to come in and stake their claim over the pre-season that again only starts in late June, early July. Obviously, we've got the Champions League qualifiers coming out. I think they are due to be held just before the EGM or around about the time of the EGM. We'll find out who we've got in the qualifiers for that. So yeah, I mean, again, I can see a couple of a couple of names in the comments. Cameron Archer again. I think he was Southampton, Mulligan. Yeah, I mean, if anyone who's watching has got any names they want to throw into the mix, please feel free, and we'll try and pick up on them. But yeah, I mean, same as yourself, Billy. There's not really a set of names that I've got at the moment. I think again, I would just be hopeful that we can bring in quality. You know, that they can stand up to the rigours of Scottish football. I think the one that kind of stood out for me from the pod last night was Harry Darling was the centre back. Considering obviously we spoke about the potential exit of Robin Proper, for someone like Harry Darling to come in. I think he's only 25, played with Martin at Swansea, and seemed to be quite a big character, quite a shows leadership qualities. I think was one of the comments made.
As Tam pointed out, Tam D'Estato, I hope I'm not giving him a nickname there, he pointed out he had like about 152 recoveries, so suggested someone with good pace and ability to, like the way we would presumably play, someone who can get back and sort of like, cut off attacks. So, yeah, so he did look good, actually.
Yeah, no, same. And again, he did touch on him in the masterclass video that Martin did when he was at Swansea, which again was a good watch. I know Scotty put it in the chat, so if anyone watching it, it was definitely something to look out for to hopefully raise your confidence levels in Martin as a coach and a manager. Again, just conscious of time, Billy. There wasn't much more to comment on from the interviews. I think the only real other thing to mention was the launch of the new away kit this morning at 8. Again, Andrew and Ross from the Journal have put a post. They put a video up bang on 8 o'clock when it was released to go into an exclusive kind of deep dive on the material, and also just the general release of the away kit. So if you've not watched that, please go to the channel and cast an eye over it. Billy, I know we've had certain chats with kits, obviously last night and previously. What's your thoughts on the new away kit that was released this morning?
It's a belter. I love it. And I say that as someone who I think last season's away kit was kind of and there's been a few in the last few years that to me have just felt like sort of placeholders. And I've been a wee bit sort of critical of Castore's, as it still is. I know it's under Umbro, but Castore's sort of habit of putting out certain kits and then putting out a belter as the fifth kit, which they did last season with the Ibrox kit, which was a bit cheeky. But no, I absolutely love it. It's a personal thing and it's a visceral reaction, but the red, white and blue, the look of it, I don't know how to put it. There's some kits just make you smile. You take a look at it and you go, aye, that'll do. And that's just one of those. So, not a fashionista or anything like that. If you look at a Rangers kit and you just have a kind of a reaction to certain ones. Like I really like the bus seat one. Like I liked last season's third kit. Wasn't so fussed in the away one, but I just hope it's one of those things. I just hope it gets off to a winning start because, I know that the team can be a wee bit superstitious. So, it seems like when you've got 3, 4, 5 kits a season, if one of the kits you lose in, then the players just become not that keen to wear it. So the thing I always hope for when I've got a new top is please winning this first. Please winning it so I see it again. Because the last thing you want is you've got your favourite top and you see it twice in the season. I've got one from years ago. It's a Hummel, and it's a black one with the. It's got the sort of sky blue sort of vertical stripes, and it's quite funny. I wear it when I'm wandering around Malmo, and people are always looking at it, going, "Is that the new Malmo away top?" Which it isn't. But yeah, that one I'd be quite happy strutting about in that, to be honest. So I think they've done a cracking job, which you're hoping for in Umbro's first season. So it'd be interesting. The third kit's the one that usually goes nuts. So, and I've liked the third kit. The last 2 years, I've loved the third kit. So keen to see what they do with that. But no, a definite 2 thumbs up for me.
Yeah, same, Billy. I think I certainly look, from the leaks, obviously, that what we've seen from weeks ago. It certainly captured my imagination more and interest more than the home kit. Again, I know it's touched on in this morning's pod, but the home kit it won't ever really deviate from kind of, royal blue, white with maybe a dash of red in it. And you can't really do that unless you start looking at it going, is it really an away kit or is it really a home kit? This one again, I know there's obviously some comments saying about, it reminds Vladi of Velichka. Again, that was, again, the fact that the kit was around 2008. So again, but it just brings back memories of success, obviously better times at the club. I'm certainly one that's looking forward to get my hands on it. And again, just as you said, the potential third and fourth kits that seem to be in the pipeline. Again, we've not got any information at the moment to share. I'm sure we will when the time comes. But as you say, that they certainly hold some intrigue, shall we say, considering, as you said, it's Umbro's first season with us. Do they revert back to a classic Umbro kit? Are they going to try and maybe do something? You say special. Do they try and do something that captures the fans' imagination? I know that there was a couple of comments about bringing an orange kit back.
And the orange kit. I mean, what's funny about the orange kit is like we've had orange kits through your time, and lots of other clubs have orange kit. Orange kit, and you just watch Scottish civil society go into meltdown. So the wind-up value of that is, and I've got to be honest, the orange kit we brought out in time for the Europa League final, still wear that, love it. So yeah, sorry for interrupting, Bob, but just the orange kit thing was like, yeah, it's so funny to see the reaction to that. Yeah,
and again, obviously, I'm sure it's up on, or it will be up on X at some point if it's not already done. But obviously, as I said, Ross from Rangers Journal has kindly done more than his fair share of mock-ups of kits recently, which we've all been raving about in the chat, and I'm sure they're being posted as and when possible through the journal. So please check them out on socials. I know there was one over the last day or two, as you said, which was an orange kit, which has a red and blue, for lack of a better word, sash down the middle of it. So
you always get these mock-ups though.
Yeah. If that were to come out, if that were to become a physical product, I'm sure that it would be sold out in no time. I'm sure, as you say, it would certainly give fuel to the fire for certain certain parties to liken it to something or other. But yeah, it's certainly a good kit to see, Billy. And I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully, another couple of bangers this season from Umbro regarding kits. I know we're coming up just before the hour mark, so maybe just throw it open, Billy. Anything further from yourself you want to cover in today's news?
Not so much in the news. There were a couple of posts had come up. Scott Hammond had said that he'd be interested to see when the first Old Firm comes, given our rebuild. And I think that's very, very cynical of Scott to suggest that the SPFL computer is not a computer, or that once it generates the results, Neil Doncaster sits or someone else sits and kind of has a look at it and goes, right, what does Celtic need? It's like scurrilous to suggest that might happen. And likewise, I'm sure we won't be playing away at Aberdeen or Kilmarnock in the first game of the season, because that's just one of those things that clearly the computer's got a wee glitch in it. Other things, just to say, Gaza B was saying he thinks none of our players are worth more than 5 million. I think that's harsh. I can see why you're a bit sort of like maybe a bit sort of tainted against like some of the players in the squad, but I think Iggerman and Raskin for a start, they're definitely worth multiples of that. There's maybe not that many beyond those two that are worth an awful lot, but that's kind of the reason. I think that's one of the reasons the 49ers have looked at us and went, we are a product that can be improved. We are an asset that can be increased in value. So like there's a negative to that, but also a positive going forward. And I do think we need to cash in at least one of those two.
Yeah, I agree, Billy. I think it's, again, I think it's been touched on in other pods, the value of a player can only increase if they're part of a successful team. And, to put it straight, we haven't been successful over the last 2, 3, 4 years. and that devalues our players. But I certainly agree that, as you said, the likes are asking and Eagleman are probably those two at the moment that you look at and go, they're definitely worth at least 10 million, if not more. Again, I think if a valuation come in of 10 million, you'd be going, try and push that up a wee bit, because you feel as if you're getting a bargain at that price, especially with some of the transfers that we've seen over recent times. But yeah, it'll be an interesting one to see who goes out, who comes in over the next few weeks. We'll certainly be keeping a close eye on it here at the Journal. And again, just a shout out to Ross's own Twitter account. It's at Rant Rangers for the mock-ups. If you've not seen them, please go over, give them a like, as well as the Journal on X and the socials. I think that was everything from me, Billy. I think again we've had just under 300 folk watching, so please make sure you give us a like, subscribe on all the socials, but more specifically YouTube. It does land you in the draw for either the signed print of Colin Steen and Willie Johnston from Barca 72, or the new home top, and that will hopefully get drawn sooner rather than later. Also give us give a shout out to Off to the Match I Go, who we're sponsored by. Again, the banner at the bottom, please reach out, go on their website, have a look at their products, use Journal 10 for a 10% gift discount, and I know it's in the run up to Father's Day, so all you bears and bearettes out there, you might find that a nice gift for your dad or your loved one on that website, which would obviously be a nice gift for Father's Day. All right, I think with that being said, we'll wrap things up there. Billy, again, thanks very much for your time today. It's been I didn't think we were going to make it to 56 minutes, but we did. Just to say, keep your eye out for more pods over the weekend. Just a personal one for me, a shout out to my pal Ross. Hope you're doing well, pal. And with that being said, we'll give it every night as a